Megan Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, what we're going to do is talk a bit about the skill-will matrix. This is something that Tim sent over for us to take a look at. And so, Tim, I'm wondering, do you already have any sort of a background in this, or is this just something that you have always known about, stumbled across? What's your
Just came across it. Yeah, and from what I read, it actually comes from Blanchard and his partner in the work that they did to
Yeah,
develop.
Blanchard and Hersey. I'm trying to remember who actually put it forth. It might be actually Hersey. You know, Hersey is the quieter of the two. Obviously, Ken went on to do amazing sorts of things. And I think Paul Hersey basically took the original situational leadership model and kind of ran with that. So I don't know which one this fell into, but it is an interesting thing to discuss. So David, do you know, Shags, do you know if there's some other backstory? I'm sure we could Google it and ask Chat GPT. It would probably give us the
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I know we've all heard of this. This is something that's kind of like been around.
Yeah, T, the article that I pulled this from, in that article, they mentioned that it was developed by those two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know their background, but both Paul Hersey and Ken Blanchard are, you know, university professors. And so long before they went out on their own or started that secondary business, they were teaching coursework. And I don't know if they were teaching undergrad and grad, but whatever, you know, they were developing these principles, these concepts in leadership, and were bringing them to an academic audience. And then I think they probably realized there was a much larger, more lucrative market for these kinds of subjects. And I think you guys all know Ken Blanchard well enough to know that he was the master or the pioneer, if you will, of the short book. And so if you think about like the 1 Minute Manager, and you know, any of his series of books there, they were all rather quick reads. And I think his goal was to be able to create a book that an executive could read during a simple flight. And so got a lot of sales coming out of, what was the name of that bookstore that was at all the airports for a while? WH something or another. Do you guys remember?
Yeah, I remember, but I don't remember the name of it.
Yeah, I don't
think
even,
was it W.H. Smith?
WH Smith. Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. And so they were everywhere. I don't know if they're still around or not. I just haven't really noticed one. But I don't fly anywhere near as much as I did when I was actively doing speaking engagements and training engagements. Quite candidly, if I never get on an airplane again, I'm perfectly happy. So did enough of that. Thank you very much. So
Amen to that.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, obviously for the right situation, I'm no fool, but I'm not out there looking for that situation. Okay, anywho, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit about this this model as we see it. And again, you know, when we do these sorts of things, I just look at the model and try to figure out. I don't do all kinds of background research. I'm sure there's a whole book about this and training that goes along with it and very specific definitions for each one of these. But I prefer to just take things at face value, literally at face value, and just say, what can we deduce from what it is that we're looking at here? And we started talking about this briefly yesterday, but basically this model compares and contrasts I want to say continuum, or this dimension of skill ranging from low to high, and another dimension about will ranging from low to high. Now, will, we might want to come up with a little bit more of an expanded definition about what could will actually mean. But skill is pretty straightforward. So this would parallel with our ability axis, although skill is only one aspect of ability. So we would also include knowledge and experience, and maybe even some core physical resources if they're absolutely essential to the task being done. So this one, I think we kind of know. But what else could will mean? So what other words? What else would parallel or
Drive.
what's that now? I'm sorry, David.
Drive.
thrive. So this idea about, or is thrive an outcome, high thrive, low thrive, or is it more about the drive to thrive? Maybe what else you guys want to throw into the mix? What else could we?
I'm thinking desire.
Compelled.
I'm also.
Fire?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Compelled,
Say that again. I'm sorry, Shags.
compelled,
Compelled. Okay.
motivation.
Motivated, so obviously there's something going on here that's talking a little bit more about the emotional side of things versus skill, which is a little bit more about the practical, or we tend to
Provocation.
describe these. Yeah, we tend to describe these things in ChangeWorks as being the x-axis is all about concrete sort of variables that come into play as we go about determining the likelihood of someone following through and making a change occur. So these are concrete. And by that, I mean, these are measurable, testable, quantifiable, provable one way or another. Where we look at things like will, motivation, inspiration, these sorts of things, these tend to be more on the abstract side of things. So, and by abstract, I mean that while we might all say we know what these mean, what they actually mean is unique to each of us. So when we're trying to talk about what this internal experience is of being motivated, am I describing the same thing that you guys might mean when you're talking about motivation? I mean, overall, I'm sure our general definitions would match, but when I say I'm really motivated, am I describing the same actual experience that you guys might be referring to when you describe yourself as being highly motivated? So this is a little bit,
Not highly motivated for anything much these days.
yeah, there you go, right?
To be honest with you, I'm happy if I get up and my back doesn't hurt.
All right, well, there it is, and that's an accomplishment in and of itself. And so there you go. The will to survive. Going back to David's reference about thrive. So yeah. Anyway, so I do think we're still looking at something concrete versus something abstract. And yeah. Now they're basically using this matrix. Now, Tim chatted something over to all of us. Let me just go ahead and click on this for a second. A complete guide.
That's the link. That's the link that the image comes from.
Oh, excellent. So if all of you just want to go ahead and click on that, he chatted it over to everybody. So you go right ahead. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is save this as a PDF if it'll let me. Yeah, export it as a PDF file to the desktop. Thank you very much. And so they're talking about the quadrants, the skill will matrix, according to the world of work. Don't know what that is, but obviously we could click and learn more. Let's slide this over here so everybody can see it on the recording. No, I don't need whatever you're trying to sell me. No, not yet. I'm not convinced. Anyway, world of work, we could click on that and figure out what that goes on. But it says the matrix places will, willingness, enthusiasm, and self-drive. On the vertical matrix, that would be axis. The matrix is the result. And skill, core capability on the horizontal. Willingness is related to motivation. In short, the matrix, that's the four things that's creating our matrix for us. The matrix enables managers to determine how to help every employee improve their performance. This in turn leads to a motivated, engaged workforce, willing and able to help you achieve your business goals and desired results. I agree with that paragraph up to a certain point. I still don't think it's telling us the whole story, but it's telling us enough of the story that I think there is some great practical value in understanding and perhaps applying their model. Thoughts about that, everybody? Oh, Edie's joined us. Hey there, Brian. Hello, hello. Chris, hi.
Hi.
So what do you guys think? Is when you read this, the matrix enables managers to determine how to help every employee improve their performance? I don't disagree with that. This in turn leads to a motivated, engaged workforce. And that's where my head goes. Not necessarily. There's other variables that are involved here. Yeah. Okay, thoughts about that, anybody?
That last part sounds quite oversimplistic.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. I would agree. But again, as we talked about yesterday, many people in our industry have taken a profoundly simple concept and built a multi-million-dollar business around it. And so our desire for things to be complete and accurate and thorough and whatever else words you want to put onto our standards for doing things are far beyond what's actually necessary for us to provide value to the clients that we work with every day. You guys agree with that? Yeah.
Scrolling
Yeah.
down, you'll see how it seems to be applied under situational leadership model.
Yeah. Now, this situational
interesting.
leadership model, this is actually Blanchard's a
Mm-hmm.
situational model, directing, coaching. Yeah, because he uses these, this is a modified language. This would be situational leadership 2. If we go back to situational leadership 1, which with all due respect, I do prefer, you're going to see different labels for a couple of these. And I tend to find their labels far more understandable than situational leadership 2. So for example, or to just flesh it out, in situational leadership 1, the 4 leadership styles were telling, selling, participating, and delegating. Telling, selling, participating, and delegating. When I hear those words, they sound distinctive enough that I know exactly what they mean. So telling is telling. And yes, that matches directing well enough. So not a big disconnect here. Selling and coaching to me feel like very different things. And in the original situational leadership model, they would say that one of the things that you have to do is realize that as someone's level of ability increases, their developmental level increases, something's going to happen to their desire to follow through and do it. And you're going to have to switch from telling them what to do to telling them why they need to do it that particular way and sell them on what I want to say, following through, matching what you're saying, following your advice. So on the one hand, you're letting go a little bit, but you're still there trying to convince this person that whatever it is you've been telling them to do is something they need to do. Coaching to me does not seem directive enough to even be what we're saying here when it comes to selling. So selling is about telling people the benefits, the why behind whatever they're being told to do. So I've always had some issue with coaching as being the more, let me say, accurate description of what should be happening here. Thoughts about that or not so much?
Yeah,
No.
that's interesting. See, I wonder, and I'll be interested in hearing from our cohort here. Like, these models seem to be built on matrix uh, that are hierarchical in nature.
Mhm.
But when they talk about the impact of AI and how organizational structures are going to be more decentralized in terms of self-organizing, I
Yeah.
wonder how does these play into that? Like where does this fit in, or is this just some old paradigm that, by and large, we kind of just hang on to?
Yeah. Anybody want to chime in before I throw in my 2 cents? Okay. Um, Brian, what I can tell you for certain is that when I went through my situational leadership training, and yeah, this is some 40 years ago, um, one of the things that we were very much talking about this is that this can be applied at the like leader follower level or the manager employee kind of level. It can also be applied at the team leader to team member. It can be applied peer to peer. It can be applied to self, but you have to be very aware of what's going on. So I think it can be applied, deployed at a great many different levels. That being said, I don't know where the whole AI thing fits in. So tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking in that regard.
Well, it talks about how it's shifting a lot of some of these mundane kinds of things that so-called managers, leaders would
Mm,
be
yeah.
managing, and now so a lot of teens are, and they talk about this a lot. I was just on a call about exponential organization.
Mm,
And an exponential organization, one of the pillars is decentralization. And so a lot of
yeah.
focal point is on those kinds of tasks that you actually need in terms of feedback loops and those kinds of things. You can automate that, but it's taken away some of this administrative kinds of things. And
Mm,
that's interesting to me. Because you think about
yeah.
waste, like even in healthcare, a lot of the waste in healthcare is administrative kinds of tasks. That's a big part of waste.
Right, but those administrative tasks on the healthcare side of things that tend to be so costly involves filling out forms. That can
Right,
definitely be automated. I mean,
right.
Linda could tell us the exact number, but she, she does all this work with the League of Women Voters specifically about healthcare around the world and why healthcare in the United States is as expensive as it is. And the bottom line is that it's as expensive as it is here, primarily. I'm going to say that it is primarily because of administrative costs. And if all we could do was get the insurance companies to agree upon a standardized form, the costs of the administration would be cut dramatically. So anyway, yeah. So administration is definitely that can be automated because that's about taking information from some sort of a database and plugging it into the right spot in whatever the form happens to be. Now, David, I'm going to throw something to you in just a second because I'm curious to know if you are in agreement with me on this. I think when we're talking about stuff like leading other people, managing other people, I think it's going to be a long time coming before that can be delegated to AI, because this requires application. This requires experiential learning. This requires someone to actually be there to coach and mentor and help that person to develop whatever that happens to be. I don't believe that AI is where it is right now, where it needs to be right now to be able to even approach that particular thing. And this is
Yeah,
the question I want to throw to David for just a second, is that when they're talking about the self-managing, self-governing, whatever organization, whatever word you describe to describe that organization, they're going to have to first and foremost look at recruiting and hiring, because not everybody can do that and ever will be able to do that. I don't care how much AI is involved in what's going on. So, David, are you in agreement with that, or?
Yeah, no, I heard the other day, and I don't remember if it was on this call or another call, but we're not thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. And
Mhm.
AI may have good thinking, but it doesn't exhibit feeling.
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. And they're not saying it's going to like the AI is going to be like the leader, but what they were talking about is this idea how it changes the structure of business. So, for instance, in most of these hierarchical kinds of things, information flows seems to be constricted. And so when the nature of the business structure changed, so does some of this kind of need to manage certain things, not just the role of,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
paper and that kind of. So they were talking about that kind of thing. And they
Well, I
said the
do.
model, higher, Chinese model that
Yeah,
that uh took over for GE that produces all of these refrigerators. So there's 80,000 employees. They self-manage in two groups of 2,000 or something like that. And
is this the name of the company you're talking about?
yeah, higher. It's a
Higher
Chinese model.
Rin Heyi?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's a Chinese model that Stanford is now studying, and it's a self-organized 80,000 people. So he's actually introducing this to um, there's a whole book and everything written about this. That's why I was like, but the one that Kathy had talked about before is how this plays out in healthcare, which is the Bertzorg model. Uh, it's quite fascinating to see it because he said where some people see in the hierarchical model them as like captain of the ship, he see himself as an architect that's creating space for people to perform. So each group it has their own P&L. Each group has all these various things, but they focus on hiring the right people, developing them into these self-management groups. But
Yeah.
it's quite fascinating to see it.
But I do think it's going to go back to hiring practices, first and foremost, because I have to hire people that are able, or at least are aligned with this way of operating, this way of
Mhm.
doing whatever it is that needs to be done. I did just chat over to everybody a link to an explanation of that model. As I've scrolled through it, I don't see a particular diagram that we can overlay, but yeah, but that's all good. It's showing the different aspects of what the model actually covers. That all being said, I very strongly believe that at this point in time, anything related to hard skills, anything related to procedural sorts of things, those can most definitely be assisted greatly with artificial intelligence. But when it comes to soft skills, I think it's got a lot of way to go. Again, think
Oh
about
yeah.
online education. We've had online courses now for what, the better part of a decade? Um, and you guys know that the investment that's been made in online learning has been vast. But what
Mhm.
has the outcome actually been? So do you guys believe that what's been automated is somehow or another has proven to be better than the classroom sorts of things that we would do?
Not at all.
Coaching? No,
No.
it's not. In fact, I think that the statistic still shows that among all the people who start a training program online, less than 1 in 5 will actually finish it. Now, of course, if they're being monitored and they have to finish it, then that's a different dynamic altogether. But if you left them on their own accord, the likelihood of them actually finishing the course is rather remote. It's very easy to sell an online learning program. It's very difficult to get people to finish the training.
Mhm.
So T, I think, as we're continuing to move at a rapid pace in business and industry, I can see where AI could be used, could be leveraged, even in the management of people. As you read through this article, you can see how this manager and some of those examples that they offer at the end of the article, she has to plot her team into one of those quadrants. And I can see where through the right kind of prompt engineering with AI, a manager could get recommendations on, okay, so if your employee plots in this quadrant, here are some recommendations as to how you would manage that employee. So I can see where organizations might lean towards using AI in that regard, especially when we see managers' span of control increasing. They're managing large groups of folks.
Oops,
And
sorry.
we're looking for ways to make that happen. Yeah.
Yep. I agree. In fact, what I was just trying to do is open up Chat GPT just to see if I can put a query into chat and see what it gives me as far as direction on how I as a leader might be able to work with someone. Now, remember, if you were going back to situational leadership, that we don't use this developmental level scale that's at the bottom. We figured out long ago that if there is a bell curve that illustrates what the leader is doing, it has to map to a bell curve that illustrates what's going on with the follower. And we were able to actually plot this on the master stream itself during phases 3 and 4 of the master stream process to really see how it maps, and then also see how we will progress, we will move through these different styles as we are watching or managing our follower in progressing on their own path, their comparable kind of path to all this sort of thing. Just to finish off what I was saying about this, in situational leadership 2, they use the third style as being supporting in Hersey's work, or the original situational leadership 1 model. It was participating and then ultimately delegating. When I hear the words coaching and supporting, I don't really know what the unique distinctions are between these two that make one all that different than the other. These two words feel much more as synonyms. When I hear about selling and participating, those feel significantly different from one another. And so again, I tend to favor the situational leadership one language for what's going on here. Now, Chris, am I correct? You are a Blanchard certified trainer, is that right? Go ahead and mute yourself and blow your own horn. He's still muted there, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that Chris says yes there. So obviously he's somewhere he can't really talk, but yeah, Chris, at a certain point, we'd like you to kind of weigh in on this. I would be very curious to know not so much why Blanchard has chosen coaching and supporting, but why did Blanchard decide to abandon selling and participating? So I'm more interested in why was that let go instead of, yeah, that's what I thought. It's a legal issue because that's the language that Hersey continues to use to this day. Right, yeah, I love it.
Legal meaning what?
Legal meaning that it may very well be that when Blanchard and Hersey decided to go their separate ways, Hersey may very well have said, I own the language of situational leadership one. Blanchard had to modify some things in order to have the model be unique enough that Hersey would leave him alone.
Got it. I wasn't aware of their divorce.
Well, at some point they went separate ways. That's why everything is Blanchard Training and Development. It's not Blanchard and Hersey. So yeah, yep. I met with SL1 people. They want me to work with them, and that's a selling point. It absolutely is. It's got to be. So anyway, bottom line, I do find the model situational leadership one superior to situational leadership two. So I think they chose the right language to begin with, and this is an unfortunate development that went on there. But more problematic is that they don't indicate that there is a follower curve that is ultimately what the style curve is trying to manage. And because I'm not seeing those two curves, I think this loses a great deal of impact. At a certain point, by the way, I did bring that up to Blanchard's attention. And basically, I was told that they're trying to keep the model super simple for people to embrace. So, so there you go.
Does the first version have a follow-up curve?
No. No, that's our contribution. When we did the merging of brilliance, we brought along a few, I think, important developments to it. The first is that this has to have that bell curve to match the follower. And the reason why I knew that bell curve was in order for me to place it on the master stream, it needed to be describing the follower's behavior. The master stream shows the level of productive tension, or rather the flow of productive tension that a targeted individual is experiencing, whether that targeted individual is a prospect or an employee or a client of some sort, doesn't really matter. That the master stream curve is talking about that individual, not about the person who is trying to impact what's going on. For that, we have a protocol. And that protocol is really talking about what it is that the leader needs to be doing, or the sales professional, or the therapist, or the manager, or the whatever needs to be doing. So that was the first thing that we did. And the second thing, because we then overlaid it on the master stream to show where it would fit and how that would enhance our protocols, but also how our protocols could expand on what Blanchard was doing. So for example, in the world of situational leadership, there is no discussion of a phase one. So I don't have a master stream to bring up easily right now, but you guys know it's got 5 phases. Phase one is the connecting phase. It's before you get down to work, you got to make sure that you and your follower are on the same page when it comes to your role, your desired outcome. You know, that you're there to be of service, you're there to help them. So we want to get that relationship tension lowered so we can get into the task tension. Situational leadership also doesn't talk about a phase two. Phase two is the analyzing phase. This is where we're asking questions to better understand what our follower is going through, but also help our follower to better understand what our follower is going through. So those two phases are either assumed to be happening because they have to happen before I can get into the business of doing this. So I think we added that to the discussion. The third thing, and I think a very interesting thing, is that we added the concept of the critical management moment. The critical management moment is where we need to change from that selling behavior to that participating behavior. Otherwise, we're going to watch that individual's level of commitment drop down. And so commitment is what we're really looking for on that. So how ready are they to do something? In fact, in situational leadership too, these are not described as developmental levels, but readiness levels. So how ready are they to do something? How committed are they to do something? That's two dimensions, not one, and that gives rise to a similar plotting. So again, we can revisit that whenever you guys want, but I promise you we've already got videos where we've done this in slow motion. So basically what I'm saying here is that if I'm really good at tension management, I'm going to switch from that from that selling to that participating, or from coaching to supporting, before the individual's level of commitment drops too far. When you hear the word commitment, I want you to hear the word tension. And so if I tell and sell for too long, that level of tension is going to go down, 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 to the point where the person is in power apathy, maybe even apathy. And so I'm going to have to do a lot of supporting before I can delegate, or I'm going to have to do a lot of participating before I can delegate. On the other hand, if I apply the principles of tension management to situational leadership, I will very quickly know that my goal is to move from selling to participating as quickly as possible. And so that keeps the level of productive tension high. That smooths out the whole developmental experience for somebody, and saves me the workload of having to correct tension flow that unfortunately went awry. So those were the three big contributions I felt we made to the world of situational leadership, but it just, doesn't match with what their marketing model is, or how they want to go about talking about how their material actually pans out. So there's a great deal of, obviously, Blanchard is infinitely more successful than I've ever been, but they approach their business a different way. I was never trying to be a big deal. I was really only trying to function more as a boutique. I was looking for the brightest and the best. I was looking for people who wanted to go deep, deep, deep into understanding something, as opposed to taking some, and again, I don't mean to demean it, but something that's been simplified and presented as a very practical way to have impact on people's behavior across the board, whatever. And I don't disagree that what they've put together can have some positive impact on what people are doing, but I know I can improve the result if I can combine what we know about tension management to what's been presented in the world of situational leadership. Thoughts about that? Comments about that?
Awesome. I like the boutique approach myself, because the challenge I see with a lot of these models, I'm not saying in a judgmental way regarding their efficacy, but it just seems like they become kind of like a fad. You know, because people go from one model to the next model to the next model.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
something underneath the model for them to work, but then when it doesn't work, they blame the model.
Yeah, I think that you're right. And they did take situational leadership and expand it in many different ways. There were a lot of small, follow-up books that came out after situational leadership. So there was the 1 Minute Manager. Actually, I don't know which came first, the 1 Minute Manager or situational leadership. Obviously, I think it was situational leadership because that's what they were teaching at their
Mhm.
the university setting. So the 1 Minute Manager, then there was leadership and the 1 Minute Manager, which brought the two together. And then there was, lots of variations on the 1 Minute Manager. The 1 Minute Manager gets fit, the 1 Minute Manager, whatever it happens to be. So these more portable, approachable sorts of concepts and techniques are where their real niche kind of came into play there.
Mhm.
I think about application, because if models
Right.
like this are not institutionalized, would a busy manager under a lot of tension, uh, would they slow down to fill out a form like this and plot their employees
Well,
in
and
one
they,
of
they
these four
may. And in
quadrants?
fact, if you were to really look at all the resource materials that were developed for situational leadership, and Chris can tell us what's currently available, but there were all kinds of planning sheets and assessment sheets and all sorts of, in fact, there was even a board game that you could play to really, apply this. Yep, he's saying that now they've automated it to an app, sort of a thing. So there were all kinds of diagnostic tools and planning tools and all sorts of things that came along with this model. Because I believe in the early day, not only did they make a good deal of money off of presenting the model and licensing the model, they made a lot of money selling those forms, selling those tests and all that sort of thing that came along. I mean, it was an 11 by 17 piece of paper printed on both sides, folded in half. So, it was a pretty basic kind of thing, but I think they sold for several dollars per copy. So yeah, yep. But nevertheless, I believe that even a highly skilled person in terms of situational leadership will be nowhere near as effective as someone who knows what they're doing with situational leadership and understands tension. So that's what we're really saying. We've never tried to replace anybody's model. We really are about merging the brilliance that everyone brings to the industry. So my goal was always, how do I go about working in harmony with all these models? How can I go about enhancing the models? And how could those models go about contributing something to our understanding of how humans operate as well? So I wasn't coming at it from a competitive sort of viewpoint. It's just not really who I am. So
Right, but to Tim's point, the application part though, that's what I value about tension management because implementation seems to be lacking, right? So a lot of people we're content overwhelmed with content, but in terms of shaping that for the context that you're actually operating in and then implementing something, particularly towards some
yeah,
semblance of progress, that seems to be where people are just like, oh yeah, so they didn't find it with that, and then they'll go to the next thing, to the next thing. I'm like, where does this end? You see this with all these different applications and so-called smartphones that people seemingly still lack critical thinking skills because it's
you're
I
right.
push the button.
You're right. No, you're right. You're right. You're right. So I found a diagram that can help. Situational leadership is right here. The thing is that we have to invert it. So rather than going, did you notice that their curve is backwards?
Oh
So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
theirs
well,
is up.
yeah,
Yes.
the curve is kind of weird in many ways, and they've never really tried to explain all that, although they've said it's driven by what the leader is supposed to be doing. So that's why the low and the high would map to the axes. However, if we're talking to the about the the follower. Instead, you're going to see that things need to be mapped out a little differently. And so if I took phase 3 and phase 4 and I simply divided it, I could say that this little first half of phase 3, this is the R1 or the D1, this is the D2. Although their ability is increasing, their level of commitment is going down. If we then move in to phase 3, the critical management moment is right here. When do we change our input so that that person switches from someone who is an R2 or a D2 to an R3, D3 sort of a person, so that I can start participating with them. And as I participate with them, I am now getting ready to delegate everything to them where they can take the ball and do what needs to be done on their own. So this is what we really are talking about. It's the readiness curve, if you will. The 2 dimensions on the readiness curve, you can look at ability, but you're assuming that ability goes up over time. And it does, in fact, go up over time. One can only hope. However, when you're looking at the master stream, you're not looking at challenge versus ability. You are looking at tension over time. And so this whole master stream, this lower axis is all about time. So time is progressing, progressing, progressing. This individual is progressing. Time is passing. And as they pass, I want to make sure that I'm watching their level of tension, or their level of commitment, or their level of will, if we want to take it back to where this conversation began. And that's when I need to basically say, I cannot afford to let their level of will drop too far before I start doing those things that are going to equip them to be someone who is ready, willing, and able to be delegated to. If that makes any sense. Yes? No? No? As I go through this, are you guys kind of wondering, why aren't they interested in this? So
Yeah, that's interesting.
it is what it is. So what can you really do?
Is he the one that you said you met and spoke to, or was that
Yeah.
Coven?
Oh, yeah. In fact, when Ken Blanchard first started teaching situational leadership, and this is many, many years ago, before I went into private practice, I worked for a company, and my immediate boss, who was one of the son of the owner, was actually going through kind of a master's level program specifically with Ken and Paul. And it involved him traveling from Michigan to California for some extended visits, at least a handful of times to cover all the material. And during that time, my boss actually lived with Ken Blanchard. And so when Ken was coming through Ann Arbor, Michigan to teach situational leadership, I was in one of those classes, and there were only 8 students in the class. And so I was there very early on. I mean, now you'd imagine there'd be dozens, if not hundreds of people that are going through this kind of training. When I went through the training, there was 8 people in the class. And so there you go. So it goes back a good long while, but nevertheless, it's just not their business model. And, that's fine, more power to them. But we did bring this along. Now, to kind of connect this back to where this conversation began, let's go back to looking at these skill-will matrix inputs. They're saying that if you have low skill and low will, you need to be very directive with them. That would be telling. Is that correct? That would be telling. Yes. I have no choice. No, that's not true. You tell someone who has a very high level of will, but a low level of skill. So they're using.
Did you say low and low?
No, I'm saying that where the whole thing begins. Let me give you guys the setup. Situational leadership begins with someone being at an R1 level of readiness or a D1 developmental level. That level is characterized by a high level of commitment, but a low level of readiness. A high level of motivation, but a low level of ability to do that. And that is exemplified, if you will, by someone who is on their first day of a new job. So think about that. You're a brand new employee. Your level of ability may be low. And again, you might have brought lots of ability in with you, but you're brand new to the situation. You don't know who's who and what's what and what's where and all that sort of stuff. And so for at least a period of time, you're starting from that kind of square one-ish, relatively speaking, place. So we know that your level of ability to be successful in that moment is quite low in that moment. But we also know that a brand new employee's level of commitment and enthusiasm and motivation is very high on day one. In fact, it may be higher on day one than it will ever be on any of the days that follow. So you guys with me on this? You walk into a brand new job and you're as enthusiastic as it can be, but you really don't know what to do or how to do it quite yet. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Now,
Yep,
there's
been there, done that.
yeah, right. That's just the way that it is. They're saying that what you want to do at that point in time is to guide the person. Now, I don't think that guiding is really the best description here. I'm saying that person has all the enthusiasm, all the will, but they are lacking in the knowledge. If anything, they need to be told what to do, how to do it, what's where, who's who, all those kinds of things in no uncertain terms. Keep in mind that at that point in time, what would you say about their level of awareness? Is it high or low?
Hey, I saw a clip that matched D1 with S1.
Yes, D1
D.
and S1 is absolutely true. The S1 style features a very high level of task input, but a low level of a relationship input, or in situational leadership too, S1 has a very high level of directive behavior, but a low level of supportive behavior. Again, I don't like this word. And the reason for it is because they're saying what that person needs at that point in time, what a D1 needs is a lot of direction about how to do it. But you don't need to worry about their enthusiasm. I don't need to be encouraging them or anything. They're already as enthusiastic as they're ever going to be. And so I don't need to put in a lot of this relationship input or supportive behavior. Again, the language of situational leadership 1 is far more clear. So that's that. Now, the question then becomes, well, who do I want to be directing? Well, it's unfortunate they've used the color purple, because that's not at all what you want to do. Purple here is when they're with a high will and a high skill. That's the D4. That's level 4 readiness. That's when I'm going to move into my S4 style, which involves a very, look at S, or rather look at delegating. I'm going to give a low level of directive behavior because I've already given all the directive behavior I can give you. I've already told you everything I can tell you. And I don't need to be supporting you because I should be delegating to you. You should be able to do this on your own. And so that's what this blue is all about. But blue, they're saying, is both excite and guide. I'm very confused by this. They were trying to get these two things to map to one another. So yeah, anyway, I don't like the label guide. I don't think it's directive enough. If anything, I would put direct up here. And then I would say, as the person's level of willingness drops. So let me give you this dynamic, stage 2. So you're a brand new employee again. You're geeked as geeked gets on day 1. But you came into that job with a fantasy about what that job was going to be like, what you would be doing, what the work environment would be like, the kinds of people you'd be surrounded by, the kinds of resources you would be given, all that kind of stuff. Do you believe that the reality of that environment is going to completely match your fantasy when you walked in?
No.
No. And so you're going to start noticing a couple of things. You're going to start going like, well, you know, it really isn't how they presented it during the interview at all. This doesn't feel right. This really doesn't match. This really isn't what I thought I was going to get myself into. Now, if they continue too much on that, they'll gather their goodies and go. They might very well quit within the first week. But if they say, so yeah, it's very different than what I was expecting, but you know what? It's not really all that bad. It's a workable situation. It's doable, whatever. So what happened was that as my level of awareness, my level of ability went up, my level of willingness is going to go down. Now,
Mhm.
in the master stream, we basically say this to sales representatives. You need to understand that at the beginning of your presentation, that's what phase 3 is all about. You've connected with the person, you've analyzed their situation, they're feeling out of control. It's time for you to give them a solution. As you tell them that a solution to their problem is readily available, what happens to their level of tension? What happens to their level of commitment, motivation, etc.? What happens to you the moment you find out that a solution to your problem is readily available?
Mhm. It goes down.
It goes down. You breathe that sigh of relief. You go, oh, good. Now, keep in mind, you haven't bought anything yet, right? It's just the awareness that a solution is available makes your level of tension go down. And so, do you want that level of tension to go down in a sale? No. Do you want that level of tension to go down when it comes to your employees? The answer is absolutely not. I
Mhm.
want to keep that level of commitment, enthusiasm, motivation, willingness, whatever, as high as I possibly can. And so, how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by switching from telling to selling rather quickly. Switch from directing to, in their words, it would be, wow.
Mm.
I want excite. Because that's what it's really all about. I'd have to really think that.
Just
Yeah. I don't like these labels. Bottom line, I don't like these labels. I'm okay with scales. They're right. I don't like these labels. So I
What's
guess,
a word that you will put there? I'm
well,
thinking of something like I don't think guide is the right word.
no, guide to me is not as involved as you need to be. Because think about what's happening. Again, you're the leader. You still have someone whose level of skill is going up, but they're still at the lower half of things skill-wise. They're not even at the halfway point yet. So there's still a lot of direction they're going to need, but you need to be telling them a little bit more than what to do. Because what they're starting to do is question not what to do, but why are you doing it that way? How come this is happening? You know, I gotta understand. This is not at all what it's not as understandable to me as you think it should be, and that's why I'm becoming a little less willing, a little more conservative, cautious, holding back a little bit. I want you to move from telling me what to do to telling me why, and telling me why that's so important, and help me understand that even though the environment is not something that matches my fantasy, I can still do great things here. I can still, you know, they hired the right person. You are in the right place. That's why I'm saying it's a little bit more about exciting somebody. It's about selling someone on the benefits, on the outcome for them. You know, be able to equip them to do that.
So the awakening the emotions part,
I've got to
moving
awaken
them
that
up.
emotions because I'm
Mhm.
trying to counteract a downward trend in their willingness to do that, their commitment, their motivation, their tension.
And that's a missing part that you see in a lot of organizations when they don't understand engagement starts on a personal level,
Yes,
right? So
right,
if you don't feel that safe, secure, happy, and healthy, why would they expect for someone to be engaged?
right, absolutely right. Now, let's go back to the master stream and say, I've done a good job of telling and I've done a good job of selling. Now I'm reaching that critical management moment. In this moment, I have to recognize and respond by changing my style. Move from selling somebody on why we do the things the way we want to do them to helping them apply what it is they now know, because again, they're halfway through their learning. We now need to say, we want you to start to make this your own. We want to develop you into a person who can basically run the whole show. And so what we want to do here is to participate with you, hear what you have to say, hear how you might apply it. And in that moment, what I want to do is stop selling you on why we do it the way we're doing it. And instead, in situational leadership 1, the word would be participate. So I want to become more of a mentor, more of your coach, more of your guide, rather than being someone who's just, exciting you or whatever. My level of task input is dropping because I've already given you most of it. So task input is going to diminish, if for no other reason than you've already said everything. You're running out of stuff to say. And I need to now kick back in to that, that relationship focused kind of stuff to get that level of tension to go up. Maybe I should talk to Hersey instead of Blanchard. Anywho, so yeah. I mean, obviously you guys can tell. I mean, I hope you can tell. I've thought through this a lot. I think I know my stuff, and I think I know enough about their model to be respectful of what the model is trying to accomplish. But it's missing some insights that I think can change things in a very powerful way for everybody involved. Fair enough?
So one of the things I'm thinking about, T, is what would the distribution of talent look like with this model? Because I'm thinking about job postings and recruiting, and oftentimes organizations will have a line in that announcement that something to the effect that they're looking for someone who's able to hit the ground running. And to me, that's that person who's high will, high skill. And so that's why I'm saying the distribution of, yeah.
And we talk about this when we were doing a critical analysis of situational leadership, and in fact, explaining why situational leadership is so important. It's because what managers tend to do instead of situational leadership is they do these two. They do S1 and S4. They never do S2 or S3. So you start off and they tell you everything you need to know. Tell you, and then they delegate to you. Unfortunately, they're delegating prematurely. And as a result, they're setting you up for what I believe Blanchard referred to as a leave alone zap. So a leave alone zap occurs when you did delegate prematurely. Now, be the person who got delegated to prematurely. You're not going to say to that leader, you know what, you just delegated to me prematurely. You're going to instead be thinking that this individual, for whatever reason, thinks you're ready to fly and you need to go right ahead and do the best you can possibly do. So, right, I mean, that's your mindset as that person who's being delegated to prematurely. And so you're going to give it the old college try. You're going to do things the way you believe they should be done based on what you were told, even though there was never any selling, there was never any participating. There was no coaching, there was no supporting, there was no guiding, there was no exciting. It was just direct and delegate. And so you end up creating a leave alone zap. A leave alone zap occurs when you now as the leader go, well, what the heck were you thinking? Why did you do that? That's not how we do things. Because you delegated prematurely, that individual did the best they could do. The chances of them actually doing what directly matched your fantasy of what they should be doing is what set them up for this failure. And if you zap them this early on, what's the likelihood of them being willing to accept delegation moving forward? Are they going to embrace it with open arms? Are they going to be a little bit cautious because you've already zapped them once?
Yep, definitely going to be cautious.
Yep. And so Yeah, and so I need to rearrange a couple of things here for that the skill will feedback. The scales are correct. It's these words that are just not right. And so yeah. That
So when you say the bottom two that most people do, but not the top, is that because of uh the energy that it takes to put into those top two?
yeah,
Because
to
that
do these
it,
top two takes a totally different skill set.
yeah,
Takes a totally different level of willingness. Keep in mind that that leader has their own readiness scale. What's their readiness to lead? So I can give them all the skills you want to give them. I can make them go through situational leadership and pass the test. But that doesn't mean that they are truly at the developmental 4 level, that they really are ready to go out there and do this. I mean, you guys live in a real world. At the end of a training class, I don't care if it was 2 days or a week, do you really believe the people walking out of your classroom are ready to go out there and immediately install, deploy, apply all the stuff that you taught them? Or do
no,
you think, no, they need to go out there and give it a try, but we need to watch them and coach them more one-on-one so that we can help them really, really master it in the workplace?
right,
Which could
right,
be anywhere from 3 to 6 months.
E-
Exactly. Companies
exactly.
companies aren't willing to spend that kind of money. These individuals don't possess that skill set. They're not going to admit that they don't know how to do these things, but they do know how to tell you what to do because they're the boss, and they do
Mhm.
know how to let you go. The other reason why they tend to focus on the S1 and S4 styles, which would still be telling and delegating or directing and delegating. Again, I don't think there's such a disconnect between directing and telling. But I also know it's a reflection of the level of productive tension that that leader is experiencing. They've got upgrade issues that need their immediate attention. They don't have time to babysit a brand new employee. They thought they hired that S4 who could be delegated to right out of the box.
Mm.
But I'm sorry, as much as I'd love for you to be able to delegate to me, because I really do know my stuff and I really do have a proven track record, I don't know where the coffee pot is. I don't know how your
Mhm.
phone system works. I haven't gone through any product training. I don't know what your sales process is. I don't know any of the things that I need to know so that I can do things effectively here. The fact that I was able to do it very successfully elsewhere bodes well for how quickly I can move through this process. But I got to go through this process. I got to go through my readiness levels. I got to go through my developmental levels. And that means I need somebody who can do the appropriate style as we work our way through this. If that's not understood and appreciated, and by the way, Chris, you could tell me if I'm right or wrong. I do not believe what I've just talked about is something that gets explored in the situational leadership program that I went through. Who knows? It's been a lot of years, 4 decades. So maybe things have evolved, but these were the gaps that I saw sitting in a student.
That sounds like leaving money on the table.
Well, you are leaving money on the table, but now let's talk a little bit about, David is all about retention. How does he
Hmm.
improve retention? These people, if I'm not managing them correctly through these moderate developmental levels or readiness levels, they may very well decide that this opportunity is not right for them. It's not how it was presented, and they don't believe they're going to be able to do what needs to be done. They're going to gather their goodies and go. And you've just spent a fortune, wasted a
Hmm.
fortune on this folly instead of being ready to move this person all the way through to help them become the person they need to be. So I would say to you, there is an absence of skill that they don't know. They've not been trained to do this. They don't show up for those kinds of trainings. Even if they've received some training, they have not received any coaching on the job applications of it. I think that because of their level of tension directing them elsewhere, and the fact that from a political perspective, they don't want to appear to be someone who doesn't have the authority that the S1 style requires. And they also don't want to be seen as someone who micromanages people, so they'll jump into S4 too soon. I know I'm dwelling on this, but hopefully you guys are finding some real value as I've worked my way through this.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I
It's nice
wonder
to have
how does
sounding
this
boards.
play out in those what do you call those executive kind of recruiters that they hunt for those high-paying jobs, like six-figure jobs, and the person stays for like a year to get to part of their
Right.
salary.
Well, and think about why that is. Let's look at the change grid for just a second. When it comes to hiring, people that are hiring tend to favor candidates who report a high level of ability and view the level of challenges being moderate at best. So why? Because they want to bring an expert onto their team. They want to bring someone who is ready to be delegated to. They want to bring someone on board who has a proven track record and has achieved a level of competence, if not mastery, around what's going on. The problem is that that individual is in apathy. And if you hire this individual, you are basically importing another company's apathy into your own company. On the other hand, if you hired someone who reported a moderate to moderately high level of ability and saw the challenges being moderate to moderately high, you would be hiring someone who on the engagement rings would be having strong intention and actual readiness or actual engagement in doing whatever it needs to be done. This is the person that you want to bring on board, the eager person to learn what needs to be learned and get into a profitable mode as quickly as possible. That's who you want. But that's not it's a safe hire to bring someone in who's downgrade, because if they were to fail, you as the hiring person can always say, yeah, but look at their resume. They have a proven track record, blah, blah, blah. And so there is that issue that's going on as well. So this is why I've always believed that until executives really understand this dynamic, they're going to keep on importing apathy, which means two things. They are going to have people who fail very early on and leave of their own accord, or they're going to have people who over the period of time are going to reduce their performance to minimum performance standards. They're never going to achieve excellence, or even if they touch on to excellence, they're still going to quickly drop down into that. And they can run on autopilot down here under the radar indefinitely, because managers are more consumed by upgrade issues than by the fact that their downgrade resources are not being leveraged and applied appropriately.
I see. I don't think people, organizations can afford that. Like Tim was talking about earlier, this incessant change. So, you're going to need workforces that are more adaptable. So they're going to have to get that mitigated quite sooner than later.
Well, they're going to have to change some cultural things and some philosophical sorts of things about what a leader's actual job is and how leaders are actually judged. So they're should be judged on bringing the most capable individual onto the thing. I'm far more interested early on to hire a highly motivated person than a highly skilled person. I can give them the skill. I can help them there, but I don't know that if I've got to motivate them starting on day one, I'm going to have to keep on motivating them through all the rest of the days. So
Interesting.
maybe I should have this particular session transcribed and feed it through ChatGPT to see if I can extract an article that lets me be on my soapbox for a little while about what we've been talking about here.
I think you should.
All right, well, I'll give it a
I hear a
whirl.
lot of chatter about this very thing. That's
Yeah,
what they were
my
talking about.
hesitation. My hesitation is that I don't want to be hired to do this kind of work.
Oh,
know,
gotcha.
I would rather say, look, if you want this kind of work done, we've got a bunch of certified people who are more than happy. They're actively building their businesses. So let's pull them into play because I'm mostly retired. And while I wouldn't mind making a little bit of play money, that's all I really am looking to do. I'm not looking to be, running a full-time business. We're
Yeah,
done.
but it would put master stream so-called out there, so so to speak. And I mean the tension management perspective. Again, these underlying kinds of things in terms of behavior is what I know is missing in so many organizations. They have the labels, they have different kinds of conceptions that they know how to deal with. Very few focus on implementation. In fact, when I was designing HR software, it said less than 1% of organizations actually know how to model engagement. Like they always say, we want hype it up to people, high performing teams. But you ask them, like, what's your model for it?
Oh,
You
yeah.
know how to model financials, but this stuff doesn't go on the books. And so people have great difficulty with this.
Well, they certainly do. Tim, just so you know, the link you just sent us doesn't go anywhere. It goes just to a file not found, a 404. So,
Oh, okay, I'll try and resend that, but this is right after the top of the hour, maybe on our next call. What I'd be curious to see is where these disses fall, particularly like with the example you just gave, with the person that's highly skilled and over time, what happens to them. But
Yep.
I'll resend the link because it talks about folks being reacting to change and being disenchanted, disidentification, disengagement,
Yeah,
the piece Brian talked about.
I think the problem is that it has those spaces in those words at the tail end of it, that if we just eliminated all those spaces, I'll bet it would work just fine. For some reason, you can't copy and paste between the webinar chat and then paste it into a URL window. How odd. Does this do anything? No, all I can do is delete it. Oh, well, anyway, there you go. We'll continue this discussion if you'd like next time around. So
Yes.
thank you all very much for joining us for today's call. So have a wonderful afternoon and we'll talk again very soon. So bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
By the way,
Awesome.
I
Take
took
care,
that
man.
link
Yes.
and I just typed in the rest of it at the end and I got the PDF to come up.
Oh, excellent. Good to know. Good to know. I'll try that.
Great, thanks, Shaq.
All right. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody. Bye for now.
Fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.